Catch up someday on my sleep. With lack of sleep. Give a couple minutes. You guys want to get started?
You heard anything?
I think we should get started. Yeah, let's go. Ready, Anton?
Recording in progress.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday, September 17th meeting of the Trinidad Planning Commission. We'll begin with the roll call.
Commissioner Slade.
I'm here.
Commissioner Cole.
Present.
Commissioner Hickman.
Here.
And Commissioner R.S. Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner R.F. Johnson is absent.
Next, we're on to approval of the minutes. I see that the June 18th ones were continued from the last meeting due to lack of quorum. But I did note that Roland, you had the vote tally. You caught that as well. Was missing.
I think Richard caught that.
Richard did. Okay. Was there anything else that anybody else wanted to change on this one? You've got that, Anton, the vote tally, right? Okay, cool.
Yeah. I didn't edit the minutes, but yeah, when we do the approved version.
Any other changes from the June 18th one? Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. 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 Oppose. All right, and Commissioner Slay abstaining, yes, due to being absent, so perfect. The August 20th minutes, did you guys handle those? Or no, those are in here and I have to abstain. That's it. So, we do not have, we've got 2 out of the 3 people that were here. So yeah, we can proceed with this one. Right. Or do we need full 3?
Yeah, because it's not a quorum of those present, it's a quorum of everybody.
Yeah. So defer this one. Okay, all right, we'll continue the August.
If anybody has some comments, edits, though, we can do.
So we can't approve them at this meeting? We need all 5?
You need 3, you need all 3, you need 3 of 5 to take a vote.
The 3 that were there, I got.
The 3 that were there.
Me and Dan.
Richard, jam us up here, buddy. Any changes from anybody? The few that were here? The two that were here?
I didn't see anything.
If you don't find them yet, you've got until next month to
No, I looked.
find them again.
Yeah, they're good.
All right.
I've got a note in here about the approval of those previous minutes being postponed due to a lack of quorum of commissioners. And I guess there's some ongoing confusion about that. Is it a quorum of voting commissioners or a quorum of commissioners who are present? We can review.
Yeah, so it's not a quorum to vote, to take an action for the planning commission requires. And the vote could be 2 to 3 or 2 to 1, would be a passing vote. So we need a minimum of 3. But if you don't have 3 present to vote on the minutes, you can't vote on the minutes.
That participated in the meeting that the minutes are about, right? Yeah. Otherwise, how can they say what? Speak the accuracy, right? That makes sense.
So are you saying this just needs to be?
I would just
reworded?
Yeah, I would just add as the second to last word there at the June meeting.
At the June meeting, yeah. Okay. Quorum of present at the June. Yeah. Otherwise, it sounds like there wasn't a quorum for
At this meeting.
Yeah.
Right. Move on then to approval of tonight's agenda. We have 1 item only. Any changes anybody here would like to see made to the agenda? Not seeing any, and there's nobody present online, and there's nobody with us in the room. Motion to approve the agenda. We can do by affirmation.
I'll move to approve it or whatever is
Yeah.
easiest.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously. Items from the floor. Again, there's nobody on the floor. There's nobody in the virtual floor, so we'll go through that.
I've got an item from the floor if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
And this is it's related to parking. And there's a somewhat new version of the California Vehicle Code, which says, and I'm paraphrasing, I believe, that no vehicles are permitted to park within 20 feet of the vehicle approach side of any marked or unmarked crosswalk, where an unmarked crosswalk is by definition any intersection where there is no stop sign or traffic signal controlling the intersection. And so there's quite a few intersections in town where I think that this isn't being enforced. Turns out that it can be enforced whether the curb is painted red or not. I'm sort of most personally affected by the intersection of Parker and Trinity Street, where especially in the morning when there's traffic from the school, just being able to see that traffic requires pulling out into traffic. And so I don't know that this is totally a planning commission item necessarily, but I know that there's, a circulation element to discuss. I know there's always discussions of parking, including the parking survey results. And I'd like to see at least some acknowledgement of someone in the city that there's some issues where there are not 20 feet of no parking zones on either side of various crosswalks in town.
Public works issue, Trevor?
Yeah, I mean, the inconsistency of red curbs was definitely something that came up in the parking study. And not just, I mean, it was at driveways, it was at intersections, it was, and so one of the recommendations is to do a red curb inventory and kind of take a look at, should the city have some standards about that? Because I think in some areas there's too much red curb. You could take just 2 feet off and get an extra parking spot. And then there's some areas where a red curb is necessary. I think it's gotten a little bit more complicated now that the Coastal Commission's saying anytime we paint red curb, we need a CDP. But
it shouldn't be terribly difficult to get a CDP approved that brings the city into state law.
And, there's, another finding is that there are a lot of encroachments in. So the city could also be like, hey, we're going to paint these red curves and we're going to lose 5 spaces, but we're going to get these 5 spaces back by making people cut back their vegetation.
Boulders.
Isn't this something that they probably want to get like official measurements and things that would be require the city engineer? Really?
Yeah, and I think it would need to be the city engineer that would evaluate that. I think right now, I don't know what, criteria Public Works uses to paint red curbs.
Why would the city staff want to be responsible for getting it right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I'm not
I'm not sure that's a question that's really been asked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't-
question.
I don't get into too much discussion, but I would think Gabe would be a great starting point on this, the city manager, the interim city manager, and seeing that state law should be pretty straightforward, I would think.
Yeah, right. So that's one approach for sure. I just wanted to put it sort of on our radar as well as we're having upcoming discussions about circulation, parking. But you're right, that is perhaps the most logical first step.
But it is a planning issue, so they all be kept in the loop.
All right, then with that, we are on to agenda item number 1. Trevor, take it away.
Right, so we had been working on the safety element for a while, but I had not been including the emergency response section 1 because I didn't necessarily have updated background information, but also because it was not it's not going to be part of the local coastal program, so not paid for by the grant, and it's not something to get to the Coastal Commission. So, but I thought it would be good to continue to work on that. And then the noise element often goes along with the safety element. And we did talk about that a few years ago. It's also probably not part of the LCP. But I made some of the edits that we discussed at the last meeting. But before going out and trying to get some new noise readings, I just thought I'd talk to you guys about I know things like pickleball have come up with some other noise issues, so I just thought I'd make sure, got the understanding of what the current noise issue in the city. And then I did also look at some other noise elements and added some policies. Oh, and I tried to, one of the comments was it was a little too technical, so I tried to kind of summarize. Take out. And that's still in the definitions, but.
All right, then, listed objections, I'd suggest we just kind of go through page by page. It's not a whole lot of pages, this packet.
Yeah, I've got some bigger picture stuff. Maybe it's we might consider discussing before we go page by page. A lot of this is really rooted in the fact that I don't love the fact that the pickleball court was shut down for noise-related issues. When I pulled a few other, I'm not gonna lie, I had ChatGPT pull some other noise elements from around coastal California, and I think that if we sort of recategorize for the sake of context and compatibility some of the noise sources, we can sort of distinguish between community noise sources, which are acceptable, versus potentially potential nuisancey. So what I've done is I've printed, I'll just pass these down. Now I might opt to recategorize some of these categories of noise just based on their source. Because there's also some inherent, redundancy in the existing conditions. So you can see trying to sort of keep apart stationary sources versus transportation versus atmospheric and environmental sources of noise, where community sources, including things like schools and recreation, are, as some elements say, reasonable and expected parts of community life. And in some municipalities, they are actually exempt from daytime nuisance standards. And then that leaves things like commercial and industrial operations and construction in the commercial and industrial category. Those are, again, potential nuisances. Then under transportation, automobile traffic, including personal vehicle traffic, belonging to tourists, and commercial traffic and other traffic, including aircraft traffic, are, again, one of the things that I don't love about the element as it's written is sort of othering of tourists, right? I think that there is some noise produced by tourists. I would say the vast majority of that is probably produced by their personal vehicles. I don't like that there's really a gatekeeping approach to classifying tourists as something other than sort of community noise, and things aren't really unreasonable or out of character with community life in any coastal town. So those are my big picture ideas, and I don't need to force them upon you, but I thought that could be worth considering as we distinguish between community versus other sources of noise.
Are you saying that basically, if you think about tourists, that they're really no different than residents? I mean, should they be looked at differently? Is that what you're thinking?
I mean, they are in the current text. There's, they're explicitly listed in various places as being noise sources. Like at the bottom of packet page 12, for example, Trinidad has some substantial network contributors to ambient noise levels. Noise can also come from private residences, tourists, and so on and so forth. Where I guess it was originally tourist activities. And I mean, that's true, but I'm thinking about Underwood Drive, and the vast majority of tourists that I encounter in front of the residents are just like families who are, renting some STR in town, just out for casual strolls. The really, truly noisy part of tourist visitation is all the personal vehicles that come into town. So I think that tourist noise is perhaps better reclassified as vehicle noise, and sort of singling out individual tourists who are not sort of as individual entities and as persons unusually noisy compared to your average resident.
I guess people might say, well, loud parties from tourists, but then anybody can have.
Resident, yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, there's like tourists are more likely to have parties, but residents would certainly have parties. But then, I think we often hear complaints about leaf blowers and that would be residents.
I mean, like in my day-to-day life, certainly the sort of noisiest outside noise comes from the school. Usually gleeful, happy, screaming children, sometimes bells ringing. Right now, of course, there's like a volleyball game going on, so there's screaming across the street right now. But that's, that's not unreasonable or out of character with community life. And I think really my biggest point here is sort of distinguishing noises which are perfectly acceptable, like, for example, tennis court noise or pickleball noise that comes from public enjoyment of public facilities, from what's more avoidable. Some of the language that said, maybe exemptions for, quote, activities conducted on the grounds of any public facility during regular hours of operation.
That would go there on page.
Yeah, I'm not proposing any insertions anywhere in particular, but more of a sort of broad recategorization.
I mean, it strikes me that a lot, well, you're specific, like the pickleball issue, like that some of these things could be better hashed out in a noise ordinance, like between whatever hours, community activities, which is this catch-all basket of all the things you listed, some of those are noisier than others.
Yeah, a lot of them are exempt from daytime nuisance standards. I think that's, some of these, like ambient, was it LMAX, which is the LDN, right? These are 24-hour averages. And if you look at looking at the table N3, right, that compatibility matrix, those are weighted, right? Which is to say, like in this, like outdoor sports and recreation facilities are normally acceptable up to 65 decibels and, conditionally acceptable up to 80. And correct me if I'm wrong, right? But those are averages over 24 hours. So there'll be some exceptionally noisy periods, and there will be some exceptionally quiet periods where theoretically up to 80 decibels of LDN are acceptable.
Well, if you start getting into these are criteria based on an average all day, how would you ever?
Right.
But we
Number that made any sense.
well, that is pretty that is becoming more the norm, and you have to set up your really expensive noise meter, and you have to set it up and you run it for 24 hours.
You try to hit it an average day on an average day of the year. I mean,
Yeah, no, noise and a noise ordinance it's difficult. I know it comes up occasionally at the city. The city has not adopted one yet. But it is, it's tough. I think quiet hours are a good kind of way to go. But barking dogs can be annoying during the day.
can you distinguish a windy day from not on your meter? You get natural sounds, or
Well,
Trinidad, where the surf is up big and
Oh, that absolutely.
40 decibels just, from that.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing is they're trying to make something scientific and mathematical, and I don't think the reality is there. It's going to end up being judgmental no matter what you do.
I mean, I'll also add really quickly to that point that, this particular figure, as it's right here, came from Santa Cruz's noise element, but it very closely resembles, though it's not identical, to a CEQA thresholds guide.
Oh yeah, this is a pretty standard.
Which I'll say these numbers aren't arbitrary, right? These are published values that are used in various.
Right. But I mean, actually taking that hard, set of rules and criteria and then applying them to a real situation. I mean, nobody's objecting. If you don't have somebody saying it's too noisy, then no one's gonna.
It would definitely, it would be complaint driven. And these things usually come up more as industrial uses. rotten. And the other thing that these come up as is if you have a new housing project next to one of these noise sources, you have to insulate the housing to meet that 45 decibel interior, considering these exterior numbers.
Have you encountered any noise elements that talk about, we talk about change in intensity triggering development, right? Being, so, you know, an argument we made that transitioning from, say, for example, the noise of, or an argument was this vague, right? That the noise from tennis to pickleball was more intense noise in the eyes of some than, you know, have you encountered any examples where that kind of a concept?
Yeah, and I think there's some mention of that in here where it's not really necessarily based around that, but there is something like up to 3 decibel difference isn't noticeable.
Right.
5 is starting to be noticeable.
Pretty low bar,
So,
3
yeah,
decibels.
so something where it starts to get
Yeah. Okay.
potentially significant. So that's in here somewhere.
It's under packet page 15, noise and land use compatibility guidelines, second paragraph. 3 decibel change is considered a just noticeable difference. 5 decibel is required before any noticeable change in community response will be expected.
Can you direct me towards that paragraph again?
Page 15, packet page 15, the second paragraph of C1.
The bottom of the sentence.
Anyway, so that was just kind of the question if that, you know, somebody builds I know something changes next door, right? Goes to a year-round school from I don't know, you know, I'm just thinking of
Yeah.
very unlikely scenarios for us here.
Yeah, but you have to also consider, you know, going from no noise to 5 decibels isn't
Right.
probably is not a nuisance even.
These are still average values, right? Like 5 decibels per day. Or am I?
Well, this just says dB, but that would be interesting to clarify.
Well, then there's the whole issue that there's no way to, I mean, you can't, there's no way to deal with this, but you know, some noises at a 1 decibel increase are unacceptable, you know, versus the noise of the wind or the waves, or, you know, there's certain noises that are pleasant and people like to hear.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, thinking back to my gentle recategorization of noise, why atmospheric and environmental, I think, for is sort of a separate discussion. It's kind of incorporated into this in various places, and it might just be worth pulling all of that out and saying, hey, this type of noise is just fine. And environmental and atmospheric noise is
I
not.
see someone in Trinidad complaining about the waves of the wind.
Yeah, right.
I was very angry one night. I woke up and then realized that the loud noise that I could go to sleep was the ocean. I went, give yourself some new perspective for the rest of the year. Anything else kind of broad, or do we want to kind of go through this now?
Yeah. So the noise element's not part of the LCP, but it surely is something that we would consider when looking at a CDP, evaluating a CDP. So how do those two square, I guess?
So, well, it depends on how your ordinances are written. Often a CDP is a separate approval from other approvals. In Trinidad, they sort of go together.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think it comes up in permit discussions that much for small projects. It would be more for projects that would have CEQA associated with them, probably. I'd have to think about that some.
Yeah, I mean, unlikely to really be an issue, but somebody wanted to develop industrial space, say behind Murphy's or something.
Well, you could have somebody put in a shop with equipment that would be really noisy in a residential zoned area, so.
And we, I mean, talk about noise when we're evaluating a CDP,
Yeah.
certainly construction noise, and that gets conditioned in, but
But it's really, that's a city issue, not a coastal resource issue.
yeah.
It's temporary.
It's construction.
Or maybe it doesn't matter.
No, I think that's a good, when we're writing the code, it would probably be good to differentiate that.
I mean, I guess. It doesn't really, it shouldn't really affect like our ability technically to like enforce some sort of noise restrictions through the planning process.
No, because the city has that authority regardless of. Coastal.
Well, yeah, but like the going through the CDP process wouldn't like negate that or something.
No, it shouldn't, no.
Is that the most food for thought? Yeah.
The first page I had anything on is back to page 12. I don't know if anybody had anything before that.
I have back at page 10.
Okay, 10, what you got?
Under background, noise is defined as unwanted sound, and I'm not sure that's fully accurate.
Did you propose instead?
I don't know.
Does it need to be defined?
No, I mean, I think that noise is sounds that are sort of distinguishable from noises that might be perceived by some as being unpleasant. I don't know that it's necessarily an unwanted sound.
That's it.
You'd rather say unpleasant?
Not always.
Is noise necessarily always unpleasant?
Right. Because like I said, I mean, one of the points I'm trying to reiterate here is that
Your perspective.
some noise is just a reasonable and expected part of community life. Or just being on the freaking North Coast where there's waves and wind and animals. I think
that is a kind of a standard definition for using in like ordinances, but I think that's kind of a term for convenience because you have to differentiate unwanted noise versus other sounds. And so maybe we're overusing the term noise and should be saying sound.
For what it's worth.
So I think in an ordinance, it would be sound versus noise, and we're using them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just pulling Oxford here, and a sound, especially one that is loud or unpleasant or that causes disturbance. The definition of noise, so it does have a negative connotation by definition.
Yeah. I suppose you could probably put a whole paragraph in here defining really what they mean by noise.
Right. That's not necessarily what I was hoping for, but certainly could.
And I mean, the purpose statement kind of also puts some context on it too, right? The purpose of the noise element is to ensure that the local planning area limits the exposure of the community to excessive noise levels in noise sensitive areas and at noise sensitive times of the day. So there's kind of some context already, a couple paragraphs ahead about that. Helps allay your.
But if you're having to mitigate it, that clearly is got a negative outcome.
Yeah.
But I wonder, Chris, this could come into how you're categorizing. So maybe where you're categorizing, community sources versus nuisance, it would be community sources are the sounds, and then the nuisances are the noises.
Yeah, right. I think that's, yeah, exactly. I mean, noise might be defined as sound, especially which can be perceived as a nuisance. I think that there's.
It's also just so subjective, but yeah.
Yeah, totally. It's subjective. Could be this. I mean, like if a tree falls in forest and they hear it, there's It's still noisy if nobody's perceiving it as a nuisance. Okay, an hour worth an hour worth of commentary on noise to share.
Well, the whole paragraph is actually pretty good, I think. Yeah, the lead sentence is like what?
Proposing any change or?
Oh, but I mean, I could include a little bit more description that, you know, there are other sounds that are part of the ambient noise or community noise or environmental noise. Sounds that aren't. So maybe add a little bit of an explanation there.
Yeah, I'm not sure that, yeah, right. I don't have anything to suggest on the tip of my tongue, but I think, yes, differentiating between nuisances and sort of ambient and expected and reasonable sounds is. Anything else on the first page?
Page 11, anybody? Back to page 11. Well, I just had a question. Maybe you guys discussed this last week, the redlining of and the intent of residents to maintain those characteristics. Why that was struck. I think one of the things that people enjoy about our community is it is relatively quiet and noise free. You know, for me personally, really the only consistent pollution source is 101. You know, other than that, it's pretty amazing living here, which I get to appreciate every time I go down to the Bay Area to work. I fundamentally have that reinforced frequently. And I don't know, I guess unless there's a strong sentiment to redline that, I'd like to see that added back in because I think that is an important part of the characteristic of our community. And I think
I would have taken that out based on a comment at the last meeting, but I might have also misunderstood.
Like in that same sentence, the term noise pollution is used, and I don't think it's defined anywhere else. And that might actually be a reasonable assertion in that sentence that I was so troubled by. I think noise pollution is defined as unwanted sound.
Seems like that is the only place that the term pollution came in.
This whole first bit is all rife with definitions. Noise. And on that same page, giving my thoughts about the fact that tourists shouldn't be distinguished from community there in that last sentence.
Also got a little bit of a trouble with that sentence you wrote there. It's all in red. You didn't need an and Trinidad Elementary School. You need to say something else.
I have and in the wrong place. Oh, because it was.
Instead of and, shopping center, it should have been and Trinidad.
Well, I guess the harbor area and Saunders Shopping Center were part of the commercial operations.
Yeah.
So, but I'm missing an and with, I think I was probably going to add some more things there. And
It kind of look like you're going to add something to the sentence. That's
yeah.
the little thing. It's going to be picky. One of the things, the sentence where you say between wind and waves, Trinidad also has some substantial natural contributors to ambient noise. I mean, what else? Chirping birds? I mean.
Oh, I think that was just referring to wind and waves. So maybe the also, between wind and waves, Trinidad has substantial. So I don't think that's probably the also is confusing.
Okay.
what just to the tourist thing, what if that were changed to recreational? Pretty broadly encompassing.
I like that.
Recreational activities.
Mm-hmm. Because whether or not it doesn't matter who is creating a noise with the recreation, if it's nuisance, that's the issue. I don't care who you are doing it, right? That's,
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I don't even want to be blaming tourists, as a,
Right.
a subset of people.
no, I mean,
I can imagine how that got inserted, but I would like not to leave it inserted.
we could swap that into recreational activities.
So
I'm good with
I
that.
like that. I do appreciate, I don't know if you guys added it last time, but the low flying aircraft, because we do have the approach corridor, right off the edge of the head. Back at page 13, page 4.
not a particularly big deal, but in the paragraph beginning, city streets do not have high levels of traffic. There's a few specific instances called out. And I only know this because there's been a recent uptick in activity, but I think trucks coming from the quarry should maybe be considered that section. There's been recently, it's just like a bunch of trucks coming down. Dumps full of rock. I assume they come from the quarry, I don't really know.
So that would be on West Haven and
They do enter, they get on the highway using city streets.
I had a comment kind of on that generally as well. Well, the first one is the statement during most times. That's pretty, I don't know. I don't like that. I'd like to see that either defined better or removed. Because I think that's pretty subjective, a high level of traffic. In this town, a high level of traffic can be 3 cars just went by in the hour. So that can be, that legitimately can be a dramatic uptick, right, for somebody in this community. And then just to the point we were kind of talking about, that the last 2 sentences or last 3 or 4, the rest of the paragraph had something, kind of along the lines of, large and small delivery trucks along with other commercial vehicles are acknowledged as noise sources within, and then perhaps listing the areas if it's even worse, even if it's worth listing specific areas at this point. But just kind of grouping it together, like the issue are large trucks, where they are, they're going to make noise. They don't only make noise in these specific spots, right?
This is why I suggested separating stationary sources from transportation sources of noise earlier.
They are kind of, there's traffic noise and stationary areas, section 1 and section 3, right? They are broken down.
Yeah.
By that way already, right? Unless I'm misunderstanding.
You're correct. I would favor sort of expansion of the stationary noise sources to include more of the community related aspects. And then lump, traffic noise and aircraft noise together into noise. Which could be, like I said here, distinguish between personal vehicles and commercial vehicles, not just like, the trucks making deliveries to Murphy's, but UPS truck coming by between 3 and 3:30 p.m. every day. So there's noise there.
Anything else on 13?
Yeah. Highway 101 is listed as a stationary noise source. And Highway 101 is only noisy if there's cars on it.
But is it a fixed location, a fixed spot that it's generated from?
Yeah, but the vehicles are what are moving, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
Well, I think, I understand what you're saying, Chris, but it's Highway 101 is, for one, it's outside of our jurisdiction.
Yep.
So it's sort of like this thing that's over here that you can hear from almost everywhere. And that's why it's more stationary in my mind than the traffic on the local streets, I guess.
The streets are permanent,
Right.
for now.
But you could make the argument that if the streets of the highway didn't exist, the noise wouldn't exist, right? So they only exist because of that fixed location, providing that pathway, that conduit for the noise to be here.
on the city streets, it's because I think maybe the difference is really the volume of traffic too. And that, 101 is more or less a constant flow of traffic, so it's a constant noise as opposed to like on a city street or UPS example, it moves.
Yeah, I think a conduit or high volume thoroughfare, I guess, is what makes it a stationary noise source. But again, I think there's an argument to be made that like combining with station noise. Traffic noise exists because there's that approach. Approaches listed under stationary noises.
Yeah, I mean, if you, your point, relatable traffic noise to transportation noise. Stick on Highway 101 into that. I don't know.
You suggesting a change in the wording?
Yeah, I've already sort of like proposed the sort of bigger scale changes with reorganization of noises, so I don't harp on that too much longer. So I would suggest some changes, but broader changes rather than just specific verbiage.
We not really limited, Trevor, but are these criteria that you have here, aircraft, stationary, are those pretty standardized
They're
points?
fairly standard. But I haven't looked at a lot of noise ordinances and elements recently, but they are pretty standard across jurisdictions. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Trinidad has to discuss them in the same thing. I think, if you're talking about doing like a CEQA document or something like that,
Under these headings?
yeah.
Certainly Trinidad doesn't seem to have any unique noise sources or potential for unusual compared to other developed areas, right? So why not use more standard stuff?
No, you don't have industrial or ag. So it's really primarily natural and highway and.
I think you could argue that the lack of noise is a unique aspect of the sort of noise environment in Trinidad. I mean, any given night, on my front porch, the loudest thing is the buoy bell. Like that's a pretty unique situation.
Well, that's true. Yeah, it's unique, quiet, unless our ambient noise of nature builds.
Thing I'm just thinking of too is, obviously that changes where you are in town, right? Are you elevated on the other side of 101? And then also making sure we're drafting documents that live and can function with potential growth of the town, right? So writing a document that fits exactly what our footprint is today is, in my view, narrow-minded for us. For me as a planning commissioner, right? My job is to, consider the future, and we know annexation is something that is quite likely, I think, to happen at some point in the next lifetime or two, right? In the speed of Trinidad. So just making sure what we're doing is staying aligned with that as well. I think there's something to be said for if, an entity that we're beholden to or rub up against frequently, CEQA has certain categories, and it's going to make it much easier to compare and contrast and to come up with our own set of criteria and guidelines. I don't know. You think about that for me personally. Page 14, shall we?
Again, tourists are distinguished from other community members.
Yep. Everybody good with striking that? Yeah.
You can replace with community members.
Was
Do you want to substitute recreation in that one too?
Yeah,
would that be a stationary noise source though? It could be. You know what I mean? It
Could
could
be, yeah.
it's a roving pickleball game, you know, a mobile. Um, but yeah, I had a question on that one too for stationary generators. I had fixed and portable generators used for power generation during episodic losses of power.
Yeah.
I can tell you that Murphy's that's my first indicator that the power is indeed out when the generator kicks on, or at least there's been a blip. And there's a lot of personal generators running around in town. We had that storm in 23, was it? Immediately after that, a lot of Generacs were sold, and they now fire up with great reliability
Sure do.
throughout town.
But here it's the same way, by the way.
Yeah. Your house must shield that from the, let's hit you with it. Thank you for buffering that.
Well, thank you for buffering, Marcus.
Certainly.
So I have a comment under, are you done?
Yeah, I know that, yeah.
In this section under noise standards, number 5, about 3/4 of the way down that, it says, although the city does not receive a lot of noise complaints, it would be good to have some more uniform standards. The term good,
It may be beneficial.
yeah, I don't think we're rating things good and bad here. Beneficial versus something. That would be.
And standards for, do we need to, you know, what be more specific standards for what? What standard would be beneficial?
Yeah.
You know, having noise standards or an ordinance would be beneficial just to really, clarify that.
Okay.
And the other thing is brought up on this page, where they're talking about the data that went into the table on noise, where it basically says Trinidad does not have many substantial noise sources. Note that the following noise readings were taken on unusually calm days for wind and waves. Now, what's wrong? It's like it's discounting the data a little bit, but isn't that what we're looking for? Is the noise, the decibels that are coming from things that are, you know, man-caused and stuff? I mean, to say, well, gee, we should have waited for a windy, you know, high surf day, and that would have been better data. See,
Well, and so maybe I should add back something like the part of the sentence I took out. I mean, and maybe it's not that the readings are more accurate, but the readings are more informative.
yeah, I mean, I think you'd get better data if your sound is not being overwhelmed by our natural sounds here.
On the same topic of the noise, I don't dispute that the data that's in this table is accurate. I would suggest that it is an incredibly incomplete data set. It is taken on 2 days between 4:59 to 5:43 p.m. and then 6:22 to 6:47 p.m. That is absolutely, without question, in my opinion, not representative for a noise study. You know, the noise at any of these locations will absolutely vary based off time of day, days of the week. I mean, I know there's another extreme you can go to. A 365-day noise study is probably a little bit extreme, but I think that, you know, these two very isolated data points, you know, I mean, Murphy's generates at some times of the day more noise and less noise. I can happily tell you what days I think you should be there to check. Freight day, for example, is very different. You know, than the non-freight days.
It's the kind of thing I'm looking for. I mean, is there value in doing that? I mean, we could come up and do some noise readings. We could do some more of the averages. We could do, I mean, the instantaneous stuff's a lot easier.
Sure. I mean, I guess I'd say there could be value in that, but what would we do with that information?
Yeah.
To me, I'd almost suggest just removing the data is almost maybe more.
Distraction.
It's distracting because it gives a very false impression, I think, you know, potentially of the noise values in here. You know, there's no noise samples from a lot of places in town.
Yeah.
Right?
You know, and if you really wanted more complete data, you'd need either better descriptions of the points these meetings were taken as well. I mean,
It's a map.
I was gonna say you need it.
It's a map.
Okay, so that takes care of my problem. Because an example, the Chevron station, 50 feet from the propane tank. Well, which direction? I mean, you know, you have the four principal directions, all of them have different environments. Yeah, so it might be maybe a reference to the map if you're going to put the data in the document. Not that you have to supply the map, but just a reference to it.
I mean, do we have to have data in here? Is it meaningful?
I mean, it's also subjective.
Yeah.
That the data, it gets really, I mean, which is what you're saying. It's just so difficult to get a data set that accurately describe or accurately demonstrates what we all think or feel.
Sure.
That's what matters.
Yeah. And you got later today.
I mean, I think that was demonstrated at the pickleball thing because, you know, when they did the pickleball demonstration, people were taking noise readings and the elementary school was a lot louder than the pickleball. But it's the pickleball that annoyed me.
And like if you flip back, for instance, to that, so flipping forward to the noise compatibility index, right? Like it's probably worth pointing out that one of the loudest things listed on the previous table we were just discussing, on average, is the ocean, right? Like the state beach parking lot with 5 to 10 foot, what I assume are waves with 65 decibels. Like right away, you know, the majority of that chart is eaten up just by environmental noise. Like the loudest thing in town is the ocean.
Yeah, and it wins us. True. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, back to like the discussion of.
And maybe that's more of the important point there is that often the loudest noise source.
Well, that's a loud sound. Is it really noise? I mean,
When you're right, you are right.
like to hear the sound.
That's right. That's right. It covers up some of the unwanted.
Yeah,
And maybe a paragraph giving that kind of perspective, saying, you know, as an example, noise recorded at State Beach is X decibels with this wave height. That same level of noise, reading wise, can also be found standing 10 feet away from whatever.
Diesel truck.
You know,
Right.
you know, they're both one I'm going to be much happier to sit next to, right?
well, the frequency of the sound has a major effect on noise.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, I think something that's sort of anecdotally worth relaying is that, you know, the planes that do tend to fly overhead are flying when the wind is out of the south. And that's usually during like a pretty heavy windstorm, for example, where like the waves are already worked up, it's windy outside. So, you know, in the context of our current discussion, the natural noises to some extent mask the noise of the aircraft, which otherwise be borderline intolerable on normal calm day.
Now, this leads me to the question, is there likely to be, from an outside source, the state of California, say, a requirement sometime to do a more appropriate noise study?
Potentially. So there are guidance and so there are some requirements for noise elements, and I can get you a little bit more specific information about that. You know, things like the noise contours on the highway are something that you're supposed to have. Now, I was going to look and see if Caltrans has that. I think they might. But that's not to say the state's going to come after the city for not having. You know, again, I think it comes up more in the frame. There are state requirements for insulating housing projects, especially if they're state funded, affordable kind of housing. And so you have to know what your noise environment is so that you know how much you have to insulate to get to that interior noise standard, or there's exterior noise standards too. So how far away do you have to be from the noise? But it seems, I mean, it seems like you should be able to do an individual study if anything ever.
But that's site specific, so.
That's site specific, yeah. I don't. I mean, there could be housing that goes, on the lot behind Murphy's or something. That's subject. I mean, noise.
Well, the question we haven't answered, just because, thank you for that, is Aaron's question is, does this data come out of this document as being not really represented? I don't know, is that?
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that. I think that makes a lot of sense.
I would tend to agree with him.
And I mean, it's old data anyway. And that's why, I didn't necessarily intend to keep this. I was gonna ask you if there was anything you guys wanted in terms of new noise.
I think just acknowledging that the noise environment is dynamic is important. Right? That any recordings that are made are going to be represented with a single snapshot in time and not much else.
And to Roland's point, something that, the frequency of the noise, not necessarily the volume, it's the issue, right?
It's all sound, but when we
Very
start
quiet.
calling it noise, all of a sudden we add the irritating element, which isn't necessarily the volume.
3 decibels of fingernails on a chalkboard would be just as unpleasant, I think, as, 80.
Screaming baby 100 feet away.
Well, what's the ocean doing that day? Anything else on 14 then, or are we kind of bump that one there?
Okay, one more thing.
Yeah.
In our say, we talked about this earlier. A 5 decibel change is often considered a significant impact.
Oh, page 15. Okay, so
Yeah, 15. And it's like,
where'd that come from? I guess.
yeah, significant is one of those kind of
Like a secret.
judgmental. Well,
Are these
I don't remember what this source is.
decibels or dBAs?
It says just decibels.
well, this is because these are instantaneous things, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, but dBA is
The time weighted, right?
no, it's weighted to human frequency. Is that what it is?
Well, if you're talking about people perceiving, I mean, that's a moment in time, right? I mean, this is about, except it changes to, it was up to your noise levels in the city are perceived. Well, and if somebody's perceiving a change in sound, that's not an average. That's what's happening right now. It goes from, 50 decibels to 55. That's
Yeah, right. And just to reiterate, I'm going back to the definition of an A-weighted sound level from packet page 12, where it de-emphasizes the very low, very high frequency components in a manner similar to the frequency response of the human ear. So, like, are we talking about absolute decibels here? Are we talking about dBAs, or is there really,
That's a
is there a
good
tangent reference?
question.
And throughout,
I think it would be dBA.
including in the data table itself, are those decibels, are they dBAs, or? Go check that. At the top of page 16, we're back to dBA again.
We did have a question on the last paragraph, though, kind of
There's
15. I don't know. I don't have a good solution, but this paragraph talks about residential versus commercial and distinguishing the appropriate sound levels between those, and those abut each other in this town pretty much in every location, right? You're within hearing distance of a commercial right next to residential, so I'm not sure that's the best fit for us to have one set of standards for commercial when literally across the fence is residential. Again, I don't have a solution to offer tonight, but like the old no smoking lines in restaurants, right? Or on airplanes, and magically stop there.
And I forget whether it's in this document or something else I encountered, but distinguishing between sources and receivers, I think is important. Actually, could be a residential receiver of commercially produced sound. 16.
When we're talking about table N3, halfway through, we say that they was used to determine whether new noise source requires mitigation or achieve a compatible noise environment. It's got to be a word more like acceptable or something. I mean, compatible to what? I think that's the appropriate word.
Yeah, the next paragraph down does use acceptable. The rest of them too. actually. That's on 16.
Sorry, 16 or 17.
We're on 16. I was just seeing if there's anything else on 16 that people.
Well, I know that this particular document, the way it's laid out, table N3 discussions on this page, and then the table is on the next page. And those two things should not be on separate
Well,
pages.
yes, but I did bother with the formatting because the track changes is gonna affect.
And I know that as you redo it, that should change, but just to make sure it doesn't
Yeah.
happen again.
No, it's that kind of thing bugs me.
Then I think we're on to 17.
Yeah, I guess the last, which should come as no surprise to anybody. Under goal N01, excessive noise, right? Maintain a quiet and healthful environment free from excessive noise. And I think that's a bit subjective, and I think it's also probably worth specifying excessive noise, which is unreasonable or out of character with community life. Excessive a noise which is considered to be a nuisance and or
What about just striking free from excessive noise? So it's maintaining a quiet and healthful environment and protecting the quality of life of residents, visitors, and wildlife by adequately monitoring and regulating noise and minimizing land use conflicts. That subjectivity is kind of a little bit.
yeah, fair enough. But again, I think
That works.
to no one's surprise, I'm arguing that there is noise that's you just got to accept as a community member. You got to accept noise from the elementary school. You got to accept noise from the playground. You got to accept noise from the pickleball court. These are land uses which, by definition, create noise.
Well, maybe that's where it's noise versus sound.
Yeah. But pollution would work there too, I guess. But that would have to be defined. So
Yeah.
That would bring that word back into the document.
Just a general comment on noise element policies. I mean, I think that's great. But channeling, Richard, how in the world do we enforce, accomplish, monitor? There's lots of, here's everything in programs, all the programs we put in here. And this is again just, we're going to have all these standards, but unless we, I mean, I don't know. Makes a general comment.
point, right? Go down a couple paragraphs and in program N01.1.1, the maximum level permitted is 60 decibels, and that's exceeded by the ocean.
Can we cite the ocean? Get some revenue?
But the ocean is not noise, the ocean is sound.
Well, it's noise in the current form of the document, right?
The decibels don't care if it's noise or just sound.
Right.
In 19, I think.
I'll jump in on 19. In that first paragraph, basically where it says at the bottom, greater than 5 dBA increase for ambient noise, less than 60 decibels. Again, even if the ambient environment is very quiet, we're zeroing in on sound in the environment. And we have to consider ambient noise. We can't do anything about it. Noise study, it's part of the requirements.
So kind of on that same vein, if we don't have data to tell us what our numbers are to begin with, right? I'm just looking at the definition of, CNEL, community noise equivalent, right? The average A-weighted noise level during, it gives very specific criteria after adding 5 decibels between these hours of the day. If we don't have that data, what's the point of having the metric to measure against? How is that valid for our community?
Well, that's where you'd have to have a study.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess so. My thought on that paragraph was, I guess, how do you know that a project
Without a
needs a
study?
study? Like what makes you think that a project might be noisy enough that you're gonna make them do a study? I guess.
You have to do comparisons with other things that were essentially the
Right.
same or extremely similar, right? You research.
You said you have to do some research. I guess.
Yeah, you'd have to do a baseline study and then compare your study,
Yeah.
I mean, I get what this is trying to do, but it just seems, particularly in light of maybe thinking differently about the data points that we did have, including those, the rest of this kind of falls apart a little bit for me. It's unenforced, or not actionable, because if we don't have a value for CNEL, for example, how can we ask somebody to mitigate for that or compare their readings against that?
I just imagine putting this information out in this plan and then following it up with ordinances. And then someone comes along and says, you have these ordinances and you have these specific things. And I think something's going on and the city hasn't done its job in evaluating this. You haven't done research, you don't have the data. And the
Yeah.
council is gonna go,
I'll have to look at the requirements, but it could be if we don't have this in here, we're already out of compliance anyway, which.
maybe. But it's really inviting a study, isn't it?
I also find it interesting looking at this again, like that when it's louder, you can have a lower increase in noise, where it seems like if your existing environment is quieter, it would be smaller increase would be significant when you have a quiet environment.
Well, I think that's just because whoever set this threshold is
It says
like,
that's the max. Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
just throw whatever you want in there
Yeah.
until you hit that.
Yeah.
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 Well, this is all leading into the next paragraph, which the city should develop the noise ordinance.
I do like some of the concepts in these next few things, some corridors and special events and heavy equipment, but the maximum permitting noise levels across property lines. Yeah, it's just got some really. Your sound wave crossed my property line at a decibel level too high, Tristan. I'm finally playing with Gabe.
Well, that's one of the only ways you can enforce it, because it's.
Right.
Turn down that amp.
And I guess how much of this is required, I guess, is a question I need to hear. To know, one, do we have to solve this problem? We have to solve it. That's one thing. And if not, is this a problem that we should be trying to solve right now? Or is it something that crops up very infrequently, if at all?
I would, a couple thoughts come to mind. The first may be more relevant to this particular page, which is that verbiage I shared earlier about exempting activities that are conducted on grounds of any public facility during regular hours of operation might be worth adding to this bit here, exempting
Noise restrictions, that personally I would find problematic, because that isn't, I'm not saying that the school would necessarily, but the school during a normal business hour could, whatever entity could do that. That to me is too wide open.
Yeah, fair enough. Anecdotally, like I encountered a neighbor who was glad at the end of last school year that we had heard of the marching band perform for the last time. I feel like that's
Oh, that's cruel.
yeah, that's a bit unreasonable, right? Like that's a public venue during regular business hours. I feel like if they want to have marching band practice, have at it.
Right.
Yeah. I'm not saying I'm not trying to discount your perspective at all. That's
Yeah.
sort of what led me to make that comment.
Yeah. Those are, when I used to work at SFO, the people that complain about the airport noise, I said, what was here first, the airport or you? It's like, did you know there was an airport here when you bought it? Okay, then hard time finding.
So I have, state guideline. So the government code that it comes from is the noise element shall identify and appraise noise. The noise element shall identify and appraise noise problems in the community and shall analyze and quantify to the extent practical as determined by the legislative body, current and projected noise levels for all of the following sources. Highways and freeways, primary arterials, major local streets, pass rate on railroad operations, ground rapid transit systems, commercial, general aviation, heliport, LSA, military operations, aircraft overflight, jet engine test standards, local industrial plants, including but not limited to railroad classification yards, other ground stationary noise sources, installations. Noise contours shall be shown for all of these sources. Noise contours shall be used as a guide for establishing a pattern of element. So there are some pretty specific standards for. So I guess my thought was, well, if we at least have a few noise readings, we can, so that was the attempt to quantify it to the extent practical.
So with that, I just wanted to ask you about that. So it says to the extent practical, the intro paragraph, and in the legislative body, is that us by extension of the city council? Are we the legislative body that's making this determination of whether or not this is?
It'd probably be the city council, but I think certainly you could have that recommendation. So I think there's some flexibility for the city to decide. And I mean, I don't think anybody's ever going to come after Trinidad for any of this. So that's why
Stick your neck out and say that.
I mean, you never know. I mean, we had, I don't know if you might remember there was the wood lot. There used to be a guy who chopped wood back behind the Murphys. Well, I think there's a guy who chops wood.
He does occasionally now, yeah.
At the RV park.
Yeah.
But yeah, that became, oh my goodness.
They should have.
I also, you mentioned specifically noise problems in the wording of that, which I think might sort of alleviate some of our grappling with noise versus noise pollution.
Yeah, and appraise noise problems. So maybe
there's a lot of non-problematic.
we make the description, make the argument that there's not a noise problem, except for
Isolated.
maybe isolated. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I jotted down a definition, which I'm sure is flawed, of noise pollution as sound produced by human activity outside of the reasonable and expected parts of community life.
I like that.
Produced by human activity outside of the reasonable and expected parts of community life. Sure. You call that problematic noise pollution, or whatever.
Problematic, that's nice to put that label on.
Sure, and some other guidelines are to provide sufficient information concerning the community noise environments that the noise may be. In so doing, the necessary groundwork will have been developed so that community noise ordinance may be utilized to resolve noise complaints. Develop strategies for abating excessive noise exposure through cost-effective mitigation measures in combination with zoning to avoid incompatible land uses, to protect those existing regions of the planning area where noise environments are deemed acceptable, and also those locations through.
That seems to be a well thought out list.
Because it might seem like an absurd question, but is there any mention of vibration in there? Because CEQA considers noise.
Sure, yeah, I think that does show up in here.
Well, just above there, we talk about addressing periodic or reoccurring sound sources.
Yeah, vibrations can be an issue, and vibrations have come up as, is that affecting, vibrations on Edward Street, is that affecting Bluffsville?
That wouldn't necessarily fall into noise,
Not necessarily noise.
Yeah.
but definitely not a.
So medium traveling, so wave traveling through medium. I don't know.
Well, so it sounds like overall, we need a little rethink. I need to rethink this a little bit, and maybe, this follows, more of a standard noise ordinance format, and maybe, or noise element format, and maybe that's not. That maybe it's really more the argument that there isn't a noise problem. And then maybe talk about ways to make sure that that doesn't become a problem.
Before we leave this completely, I got one more little editing thing in the very last paragraph here. They start talking about heavy equipment noises. Then there's this example such as white noise reverse alarms, and it's like it's very specific example out of extremely general stuff. I think that just we don't need an example that specific thing. He knows about noisy tools and noisy equipment. I don't think you get that.
Well, but I didn't know there was such a thing as a white noise reversal.
I think that's.
I'm not sure what that is.
Yeah, what does that sound like?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what it is. I know what a backup alarm is, on construction equipment, we all know that. And it's irritating,
Yeah.
but white.
But obviously, technology changes with that kind of thing. So it doesn't necessarily make sense to
Be specific, right?
specific.
That almost sounds like a good thing.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's the white noise reverse alarm. I think
That's
it's something.
town mitigation.
It doesn't go.
Yeah.
That was being mitigations.
Very true.
I think it was LA's noise element specifically calls out phonographs as a potential source of noise.
Photographs. Good. Perfect.
If we could incorporate that somehow, just somewhere in this, I'd be very happy. I can work with Trevor for the next draft. Great.
So Biden moved his record player.
Before we just pivot into, are we good with the noise for now? Yeah. Okay.
I think, sorry. I think I can just ask Trevor, like, was there justification for using the Santa Cruz County noise element as the source of this noise exposure table?
I have used a number of things from Santa Cruz, both the city and the county for models for Trinidad. It's probably just one I was looking at and it was copyable. I could copy and paste it.
I only have, because like I said earlier, there's like some very modest differences from like the CEQA thresholds guide. I'm wondering whether it's better to.
I probably liked
pretty.
just how it was organized, but I think it's pretty common to have. I think this table is pretty commonly in zoning or some version like that.
So we put a lot of effort into making that concise.
We'd all be delighted to know I have nothing else about this.
We'll just pause briefly here. I do see that Paula is online. Paula, I didn't know if you had any public comment specific to the noise section of this. We'll be getting to the emergency response next, but if you have anything specific to the noise stuff, now's your chance.
Oh,
Oh, you're muted again, Paula.
can you hear me now?
Yes, now you gotcha. Go ahead.
Okay, just something off the top of my head. I know that you'll be discussing annexation at some point in this century. And there are people in the spheres of influence that have chickens, and we have woodlots. We use chainsaws. So I know how much effort it takes to go through all these projected ordinances and ideas of what the law should be in the community. And the spheres of influence are a whole different set of circumstances. And I don't envy you your jobs. I don't know what you're going to do about it. And you might not end up discussing it this year or next year, but it's planning is seems like an extremely time-consuming and tedious occupation. So I thank you for your work, and I'll let you get back to it.
Thank you, Paula.
Fortunately, it's mostly Trevor's time. Right?
Yes, right. All right, so then shifting into the emergency response, which is just a few pages by comparison.
Yeah, I stole some background information, some from I think the hazard mitigation plan, some from other safety elements, some from the EOP. But it doesn't have a lot of detail in terms of specific emergency services for Trinidad because that doesn't exist. And I'm hoping someone else will write that. So I don't know a whole lot about fire. So that's in terms of the text. And then, yeah, I sort of combed other safety elements and pulled some things for policies and programs that I thought would. The old draft safety element. There we go.
Any global comments from anybody before we dive in page by page, or should we just go page by page here? All right, packet page 20. I had a comment for the second to the last paragraph. When an incident occurs, incident stabilization activities, that's where it talks about the EOC. I would suggest putting a reference in there to Trinidad's EOC and emergency plan, because technically those things exist on paper. But you know, the city will be dependent upon theoretically based on, or not theoretically, based upon the size of the emergency and the incident. The county might not open up their EOC for us if it's a very localized issue, right? And so it's going to be incumbent upon the city to do that.
Does the city have an EOC? I think what the operations plan referred to the county.
Yes.
Occasionally we don't.
Maybe the rancher did.
And there I thought, I'll have to look again. I haven't looked at that document in a few years, but if not, the city should have its own. That's a separate discussion for the council, I guess, then. But I mean, for a localized disaster with our water treatment plant, say, for example, went offline abruptly or something, and we declared a local emergency, I don't know necessarily if the county is going to fire up their EOC to manage that. Not that you would need it, the resources there, but that was my comment on that one.
And then if it's a really big emergency as well, Trinidad could be cut off.
Could be cut off, and then very frequently there's kind of like the master EOC that's coordinating that kind of stuff. For example, the earthquake in Rio Del. I would imagine that the county had their EOC up and running, but I would imagine the city also had theirs running in parallel, doing similar functions, right?
Okay, so does the city have her EOC or not?
I have to double check that. I thought there was a place designated.
Yes, it would make sense. Yeah, the town hall or the fire station would be designated. Yeah, and I think the Rancheria also has.
But anyway, I think if one, we should have one, and two, it should be referenced there just in this document, just to make sure people are aware there's the local.
On that same page regarding your highlighted query, Trevor, just wanted to ask whether it was appropriate to mention that private security company. My understanding is that that's sort of like a temporary sort of last ditch effort to provide some amount of additional security down. I don't get the impression that would be a lot of people's first choice. I doubt that it's working. I don't want to,
I mean, we could certainly put a time at the time of this writing or something. I mean, I think it is. Well, I don't know how that fits in that's part of what I don't, I'm not involved in that part of the city's operations.
So I guess I would direct that question, like, last, how do you feel about inclusion of that private security company there?
Is this reference?
The highlighted bit on top of the page.
That last sentence there. So I guess that whole paragraph, I think,
Very.
done differently might be, the city of Trinidad has the requirement to provide law enforcement and fire protection services to its residents. Currently that's being provided by the law enforcement is truly being provided by the sheriff's department. The security firm provides no law enforcement service. They have no powers greater than you or I as a citizen, right? They just don't legally, is my understanding, right? They could do a citizen's arrest and that's it, which we can do, right? So I think something like that, the law enforcement is truly provided, but maybe just emphasizing that the city has that obligation, right? I think we're a general law city, I think, is what we're categorized on as. And the same for fire protection. One of the things that currently it's Humboldt County Sheriff's Department and Trinidad Volunteer, West Haven, Cal Fire. That's fine, but yeah, kind of keeping it evergreen. I think it'd be good. But yeah. I just had a question for everybody else here. The next two paragraphs, kind of the next one describing the mutual aid and kind of how that system works. Is that beneficial to keep in here? I have a very overly informed position on a lot of this stuff. So to me, that's, common sense in my brain, but it's not. So I think that might be helpful to keep in there when I read it.
I think
I thought it was.
Okay,
yeah.
good. All right. Just explain how things work, right?
Yeah.
All right.
How dynamic is all of that? Thinking about keeping this evergreen.
It's been forever. Yeah.
Not now.
No. The master groups and entities have been those entities for a long time, and that system works. Anything else on that page? Next one. For alert methods, you asked about any more alert methods. One that popped into my mind is the city has that new, well, it's not that new anymore, but the website with notification that we all signed up, or that many of us signed up for. I think it's underutilized by the city, but I think some more routine emergency notifications. There's an email distribution list, there's text messaging. The website has this capability that we chose that company on purpose. So that would be another notification for kind of more routine stuff. I know when there's water shortages and during the tank.
Okay,
Swap,
the
that
city
kind of stuff.
website has some of these
The
capabilities.
city has a capacity to do that. Yeah, I think it currently lives through the website. And Gabe has his email distribution list. So there are some other for lower, non-emergent, but critical
Okay.
information.
Is the like those earthquake alerts? That's not coming from the county, right? That's coming from USGS or somebody else?
All of the above.
It depends on who you sign. I think it also depends on who you signed it.
And that's why you get differing information. For example, with tsunami, right? The county, some entities issued higher levels, but other entities said, no, we don't think that's necessary. And that's what elicited the confusion. Some people were evacuating. And
Yeah, but I'm thinking specifically about.
The one that comes
earthquakes.
before,
Just like
right?
moments before,
Yeah.
just the moments before there's like, that can't be county, that can't be the county. That's gotta be,
USGS, I would think.
as you consider other methods, I assume.
California Geological Survey.
Is that?
I don't know. I don't think the county, like where the rapid dissemination of information is so
No.
important, I don't think there's any
Yeah.
reliance on a county infrastructure.
Except for evacuations ahead of fires, that kind of stuff. That is going to be a county.
Yeah, right, yeah. I'm not about milliseconds here, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, ones that just tell you to pull over, duck and cover, right? Those ones, yeah.
The third full paragraph down. I don't. It's awfully specific, right? Like, does this information belong in a safety element, or does it belong more in like a set? Like, I guess I don't really fully understand the scope of this document of these specific instructions or these specific suggestions are here.
Yeah, that's a good question. And maybe it's really more of a mapping thing, but yes, safety elements are required to provide an analysis of evacuation. It might not need to be in this format though.
I'm thinking like specifically with regard to Underwood Drive, right? Like that would be great if there was egress into the state parks and, as you've said, using Green Diamond land to evacuate as well necessary, but that seems very specific for sort of this section rather than something more.
I think maybe you should go someplace else.
I mean, it is
Not-
elsewhere, right? It is
in there somewhere else.
but it's something one of the more specific suggestions.
Program goals or something.
Yeah, there it is. SAF 8.2. Nope.
Well, and I guess I sort of put the text in to frame the need for the post. But it doesn't have to be that detailed.
And I would suggest instead of dead end, limited access, limited ingress, egress is a better term because dead end is not your only limiting, right? It's ingress and egress for.
They have 8.10, page 26, where they appear again. Case.
I think there's several limited egress roads, in Trinidad. And maybe pulling out those next couple example sentences. And then if you feel it's important leaving in these situations are also common, in the immediate area surrounding Trinidad.
Yeah.
Like kind of lay that foundation you were hoping for, Trevor. Gets out of the weed name. I think my street is limited. I think your street,
We don't need to put all.
Yeah. A question on the next paragraph where you got East Bay mud. Is that just an artifact from the source document?
Yeah.
Okay.
I read right over that.
Another acronym.
Right. And then I had a question about your reference to CERT. It's just kind of sitting there. Basically, it's a beautiful definition of CERT and what a CERT team can do. But it doesn't specifically say that the Greater Trinidad area has a CERT team. You know what I mean? It's like,
I copied and pasted off the CERT website.
yeah, but maybe some context saying, the Greater Trinidad area has formed a CERT team which covers, both the city of Trinidad and the surrounding communities. They can provide services,
It sure belongs in here somewhere.
yeah.
You have it.
And I really want to, I don't know how to do this necessarily, but make sure that it's clear to people reading this that CERT is not a replacement for anything else. Right? It is a bridge to get to the point where rescuers can get here in sufficient numbers to do something. They do not replace law enforcement. They do not replace fire. They do not replace search and rescue. And it is all volunteer. So if all the volunteers are out of town or buried or, collapsed or can't, this team is not a solution. It is something else that can help us kind of bridge the gap in our limited resources. And I think that's a really important point, because I think that gets missed a lot by folks. I've heard comments made by counselors and other stuff. I've had to help educate them as to what CERT really can and can't do and how it should be viewed and as a phenomenal tool, but it's not a replacement for.
And back to your point earlier about, the city of Trinidad being obligated to provide certain protections. I think you could sort of subdivide this section into professional services versus community organizations or citizen organizations, where in the citizen organizations, but you could outline the potential for having, I think there's been talk about ambassadors who monitor the streets, answering questions and deterring crime, and also private security firms can get inserted in there as a possibility where citizens could provide some additional assistance, supplementing or bridging the gap, while professional services are.
I bristle still to this day a little bit with the use of the word professional, because I think there can be volunteer groups that are tremendously professional. And particularly when it comes to the volunteer fire service, that can be a very charged word. When I was a volunteer, it was very almost insulting. And I know that wasn't the intent. So I just want to make sure we don't put that in here, because these people dedicate a tremendous amount of their time and their dedication to become trained, to become competent, and to provide these services. So
do you have alternative suggestions as sort of support my broader recategorization?
I guess what was the intent, kind of?
Well, I mean, like you said, that CERT really bridges a gap until, I won't use the term professional services, but until some of these other organizations can provide support.
Right.
So there's other sort of citizens-based organizations like CERT, like ambassadors, like if necessary.
Emergency is like emergency responders. Does that encompass more of that sort of official?
There's official services.
They're not unofficial though either.
Well, if you call up your dictionary and what's the definition of professional, I mean, I think a lot of people would think if it's your profession, it means that's what you do for your livelihood, at least partly. And it suggests paid positions. I think you're right, using the term for people who are qualified. I think that's the general use of the term professional.
I hear you. I would say specifically to the fire service, the vast majority of folks that provide fire service in Humboldt County, let alone the United States of America, are not compensated.
Yeah.
So, but they are incredibly professional.
Yeah. So that's why
that's where, and again, this is, going back to
it's
my
a
origin
word
of fire service, ready to volunteer outside of this community. And I just wanted to just provide a word of caution on how we use that word in this document. Else any other page that you just kind of where I kind of lost track. Are we on 22 now?
We are going
just the
rest of CERT.
I'm not sure how much description of these hazards we really need in here, because these are covered in the rest of the safety element for this, but this is a little bit more focused on the results, I guess.
Are propane line, gas lines? They're applying natural gas line.
No,
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I had that same thought when I read through that part. That's just like, oh wait, we talked like defining what earthquake is or what a tsunami is. It's like, but I guess is this part of safety element sort of acting somewhat independently? Like somebody might just pull this apart?
No, it should be really, I mean, it's not going to be part of the LCP necessarily, because it's not going to govern development and CDPs. But no, it is definitely part of the safety element. This isn't necessarily something that is in other safety elements.
This does bring in the more regional issue that our local hazard doesn't bring out. We talk about, because here, like you talk about, the tsunami can take out the highway at Clam Beach North. I mean, the city safety element doesn't talk about those things. But
No, I think, this would be the city safety element, but I don't think that is talked about up in the
right.
tsunami section.
Yeah, because you're talking about an access problem due to a disaster.
Yeah.
It is short. I mean, it's a pretty wordy document already.
I could definitely work on, again, I was sort of looking for text because I didn't have any
Sure.
text. And so, yes, I think there needs to be more text on some things and less text on others. So, for this one in the chat, you can.
Couple of things that we haven't mentioned, just that first line under item 2, the following hazards are discussed in more detail above, just changing that to more specific, like earlier in the safety element rather than above. That way,
That's good.
and then when you do list, the ground failure, those things, specific hazards include but are not limited to, might be some good language to put in there. Or examples of specific hazards include ground failure, fire associated landslides.
A lot of this text is taken from directly from.
23.
Yeah, on page 23, you could probably remove what a typical soil debris avalanche
Oh, absolutely.
includes.
Ridiculously detailed and narrow.
That last sentence.
I just take that sentence out.
Paragraphs down about the transport of hazardous substances. I'm wondering, maybe I don't want to know, but what extent do hazardous substances move through? Like is 101? I mean, there are sort of official sort of what's that?
You don't want to know.
Yeah, right.
On 101,
The
yeah.
long one, it's in town proper, like off the highway, not a lot.
So it's like a Caltrans designated hazardous materials route. So that's a thing, right? Like there are some places where hazardous materials cannot be.
There's a lot of fuel and stuff going up and down the road to the harbor.
They tend to designate places they don't want things to go, as opposed to things they do, like the Caldecott Tunnel, for example, if that caught fire many years ago in the East Bay, no longer can have, fuel vehicles through there during certain hours of the day, so they'll kill as many people, basically.
So no such regulations around here, to our knowledge.
No what?
No such regulations around here, to our knowledge.
No, Highway 101 is a phenomenal corridor. And a fun hazmat fact, because I do hazmat as well, is that, one of the largest carriers of hazardous materials is the post office, UPS, and FedEx.
Didn't accept hazardous.
Well, what's really fun is this, if the triggering, so if you were running a business, and this is, sorry, it's a sidebar, and they said 100 pounds means you have to label a shipment as hazardous, what are you going to do?
Maybe 9.5 pounds.
There you go.
Yeah.
So now that shipment's unlabeled going up and down the road, right? And it's not, the things aren't even compelled, they're not dangerous. I don't want there's not gurgling, burbling things, but there's a tremendous amount of things that are going up and down the road. And the DOT has pretty robust protections in place. That's why you don't hear a lot of those things going on.
Okay.
Um,
So it's relevant, I guess, is the answer to that question. Fair enough.
to that point in that paragraph, the hazard material incident uncontrolled release, it does talk about along highways and railways. I think we could probably get a little bit more specific here along Highway 101 and lose the railway reference. Such time as the railroad comes back into over the vicinity. Maybe
I
we'll
like
add that
that.
in.
Highway 101.
Like there's also hazardous materials transported on Trinidad's roads as well, right?
So yeah,
But more likely to occur, so it doesn't come in.
23. 4.
They do reference the city's emergency operations center right here at the top. The worst.
You gotta find it.
Yeah. In the middle there, where we talk about public education, we bring in extreme heat. I don't think we can take that out of there. And that extreme.
I don't know, 75.
It's relative. But, yeah.
Were you here on Monday or Tuesday? Good Lord. In that same section, though, I think that disseminating information to the public is conduct to me seems like initiating public education campaigns, but like disseminating or facilitating seems like that would also be good. You know, like if the county's got materials about tsunami hazards, just distribute them rather than.
So replace conduct with facilitate?
No, conduct, facilitate, or disseminates, I guess would be fine. I don't strong feelings, but I know that all of the awareness needs to originate like at town hall, for example. And under 8.3, the CERT training, what type of support we're talking about? Financial support, like some good pats on the back for the CERT folks.
The city already does financial support for CERT, and they have budget for it.
So they're applying.
And they provide a space.
The city is the official sponsor of the Greater Trinidad Area CERT team, so they're sponsoring team benefits.
So maybe continue to sponsor or?
Provide financial and logistical support. Is that too
Or maybe
I think it's
support.
too specific. Support and leave that up to the city, right? You just say the city
Right.
should.
All right. Right. Pat on the back if you're rightfully satisfied with that.
So under the hazard mitigation plan incorporation at the bottom, incorporate the county hazard plan in the city of Trinidad annex. Are we talking about the city of Trinidad annex?
Because so that's what they call. So if you look at the Humboldt County hazard mitigation plan, which they're currently updating, supposed to be currently updating, there's an annex for each city, and some of the service districts too, maybe.
Oh,
So they call them annexes instead of appendix. They're like appendices.
do we call the building down the street the annex? Okay, that's what.
That's
here. Yeah.
I don't know why I say 8.4.
Was that Trevor? I missed that.
I don't see why program safe 8.4.1 needs to be in there. That's just something we need to do and then it's done.
Right.
And that sort of thing applies, not to jump too far ahead, but some of those access egress issues as well. Safe 8.10.6 and 8.10.
Oh, well, okay, there's a difference though, in that needs to be done before we adopt the safety element. So that would be done by the time we actually.
Got it. You don't just eliminate things that need to be done, but it will be done.
Yeah, yeah.
Understood.
Yes, and the rest of the pages for anybody. What left us, so public comment is taken care of. Nobody in the room and
Before we move away from the agenda item,
Yep.
told you I was done talking about noise, but it occurred to me that I didn't mention something, which was, is there like citizen science or crowdsourced monitoring of noise? I mean, there's like crowdsourced citizen science monitoring of air quality and temperature. Are there like, does that sort of resource exist already of overthinking the need to actually monitor themselves?
Are we moving on from this?
So that went back.
did you have more?
Well, we have 2 more pages.
Yeah, no, I asked if there was more. If you've got more, then let's do it.
Yeah, just quick things, like
Yep.
on page 25, you talk about emergency power supplies. At the end, they talk about power generators. We should prioritize renewable energy systems where feasible. And I'm going, do we get that involved in things? This seems like an afterthought.
Wait, which one? Sorry.
Okay,
8.6.
8.6, the last, and we should prioritize renewable energy where feasible. Why do we have any business prioritizing how people get their emergency power? That seems like a political comment to me.
Oh, well, no, well, I think that means like specific to like Trinidad Town Hall has solar with a battery storage.
Yeah, that's nice, but we're talking about prioritizing,
Well, I think it's more,
But-
maybe it's prioritizing, okay.
I think it's enough to say that what emergency power supplies can include. Power generators, battery storage, you could.
I mean, it is but this is a political document, so it could state.
I'd like to see us make it less political. Because there's another one in here too, on the next page where we talk about establish a network of equitable located resiliency centers. What does that equitably mean?
Well, the city is required to consider equity and environmental justice in its term. That is a state requirement.
And so that wording.
And climate resiliency is also a state requirement. Now, maybe this isn't necessarily the place for it, but we do have to have those things in our general.
It's just like it comes out of the blue in a document like this.
Does the city have anything pre-existing? Might be another question, the state requirements, but has the council already weighed in and said that is our priority? If it is, then that language has already been decided for us. Yeah, if the city leaders have already decided that, then that's been decided outside of our purview, right? If that's the direction of the council.
Yeah, well,
Or from the state, then.
But if it hasn't, it should just be assumed that, this now becomes a priority where the city council hasn't decided it is.
I mean, someone installed solar and batteries rather than a giant generator.
Well, I agree that would be better. So
So
I'm just
some
saying,
decision has been kind of made.
does this document, should we be promoting that in a document like this that's talking about safety? It's not talking about, environmental justice and environmental issues.
But we are held to some of that though, right? By state law.
I understand that something expected. I wonder why it's in a document like this. Seems like it just kind of creeps in there. I didn't object to previously where it talked about people getting better information.
Well, I mean, I think equitable, the renewable energy I think the important part is to have emergency backup power. But equitability in terms of, emergency operation centers or something, you don't want to leave.
Well, to say establish a network of local resilient centers. I mean, I don't have a problem with resilient. You want these things in an area that doesn't have problems.
Yeah. But I think the idea is that, historically, traditionally, centers have been located in areas of more privilege and left out people.
Planning commission, what the hell has that got to do with us?
On the state saying we
Okay.
have to try and
All right,
address those inequalities.
We'll submit.
Anything else on,
No.
okay.
I do have a question where we talk about large scale disaster preparation and we talk about resiliency to meet city needs, city responders and key city staff. I mean, how many city staff even live in town? I don't know. Are they available and all the rest of?
Yeah, and that's why I think that that language is exactly important to have in here. Because the city has an obligation to ensure that there is enough redundancy. If people don't live in town, then who is the next tier? Who's the rest of the bench that can go to the water treatment plant, that can go to city hall, that can do those things?
Yeah, well,
That's why I think
exactly.
that language is important to have in there.
I think the language is important too. It just might highlight that in this kind of a situation, if everybody who lives in the city is nowhere near the city, then what?
Well, and I think that's where the redundancy and resiliency come in.
Yeah. Just sort of stands out. It's like, oh, key city staff. Okay, are they here?
It's not this size, everybody's key city staff, I think. We don't have the luxury of having non-essential city staff.
Yeah, they're all essential. They get paid, so they better be.
Everybody's important, nobody's.
And,
And no public comment on this one, so I think with this agenda item, we are done then. Trevor, do you have what you need from us tonight?
No.
No?
Oh, wait.
I said, do you have what you need from us for these agenda items?
Oh, any need.
Did you get what you needed tonight?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I said, wait,
I think
we're just
those
going
ones-
into this.
Yeah. No, I think, it sounds like the emergency response is on the right track. We need to update, get some more specific information. Noise element, needs a little bit of a rethink potentially. So, yeah. That's good.
Commissioner reports. I just had a question, is that even still necessary since there are no committees for us to be on anymore?
I think it's always been on there. I mean, I guess you could, we did at times we've had a rep to the city council. A commissioner who would go to the city council meetings and report back. I mean, maybe you went to a community event.
Okay,
So yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah, can it include anything?
It could include anything. Yeah, it doesn't have to be committees.
Cool, all right. Any commissioners have anything to report?
Chris did his at the start, so.
Staff report then, Trevor.
I don't necessarily have a lot of things coming up that I'm gonna necessarily have ready for a meeting. I'm working on the ADU ordinance. I'd like to have something on that as soon as I can. We're looking at, things like Humboldt Bay Water, an LCP update, but there's a lot of work to do on the ordinances. I'm gonna try and keep focusing on things that, will come to you at meetings because I don't want to get too far behind. And I do have one project coming up. Maybe I mentioned it last time. That's the merger of two parcels, one's in the city and one's out of the city. Just kind of an odd situation, but the house is on the property outside this. It's a tiny little triangle. It's the only property in this area on the west side of Scenic. It's not in the city. I think it's a section and township line that was the original city limit. So it's just this little triangle. But the septic system was on the property to the south, and she needs to repair her septic system and help her repair the septic system on a different property. So
They're
anyway.
half in the city and half in the
It's
county.
half, yeah. And I think we're gonna let it remain that way. but we have to process CDP for merger and for the septic. It's a super limited, it's a super limited property because it's got branch creek going around it and it's all steep slope.
Interesting when that comes. I have lots of questions already.
To create a public park, we can have 1 foot in Trinidad, 1 foot elsewhere in
Right.
Trinidad.
So you're expecting any of this in a month?
Probably not. I don't think we'll be ready for it in October.
So maybe you,
Actually, I wanted to talk to you and see if you wanted to go out and look at the site from a geologic standpoint.
at least give me a call. Would be the first time I've been pulled into things.
Everybody else is on last chance grade.
Yeah, and I'm probably free. Maybe not. But so if there's nothing much, is there any thought about having a meeting?
I mean, we could potentially not have meetings. I mean, we often, November, December meetings, we usually cancel one of those with the holidays, and things going along. I'd hate to cancel October, November, and December. Because at some point we're gonna get where we have a lot of stuff, so I would like to keep some things coming to you. But I don't necessarily know whether we'll have things ready for October. So I guess, let me know your schedules as soon as you can ahead of time in terms of particularly the November and December meetings.
Are ongoing trails related issues still? I mean, those will fill some meetings for sure.
I mean, I don't know if you've read the coastal commissions. I mean, I think we're a little bit upset at the coastal commission for throwing the city under the bus like they did.
If they ever get that trail open and then.
We'll follow up. I think, I don't know. We'll see. I met with Gabe and Cheryl today, talked a little bit about it. We're going to meet with coastal next. The coastal commission even read the city's response. No discussion of me.
Consent item, yeah, right?
Mhm.
It was a consent item, right?
No, the consent item was the amendments.
Oh, just the amendments.
So the housing related zoning ordinance amendments. It was a hearing, but I guess their normal procedure is, so their default is that an appeal has substantial issues. So so what they were deciding on was, does the appeal have substantial issue? And their default position is yes, it does. And they don't take public. I thought they might have discussed it among themselves at least and ask questions. But apparently they don't even do that unless they didn't even, anyway.
Fortunately for us, that's at the city council. Probably really well.
So yeah, that will be an ongoing thing, and I think there are some advantages in having the coastal commission have jurisdiction on that permit and help, because they're not subject to CEQA. They can say, oh hey, I don't think a biological report is needed, so they can kind of help streamline the process of getting that 3 route open. So hopefully,
That sounds unlikely. They would streamline it.
no, they seem. They're successful.
Well, they have internally inconsistent goals.
Yes, they do.
Well, we're all the government.
Well, and it's especially frustrating when, just 2 years ago, they chastised the city for having Van Wyck closed over the objections of the York Tribe and TAS.
Future agenda items, anything on there people want to bring closer to the surface or remove or? Let's just kind of. No, nothing jumping out. All right. Shall we adjourn?